Hi, and welcome to today's topic, which is the metaphysics and emotional stress behind polycystic ovary syndrome, which I will also be referring to as PCOS during this discussion. Now, this condition surfaces when male hormones are more dominant in females, which can cause irregular or no menstrual periods. It can also go the opposite and cause heavy periods, also excess body and facial hair, acne, pelvic pain, and also difficulty getting pregnant. Now, this condition stems from many generations that resulted in women having to step up in ways that were, for example, needed, where they had to deeply tap into their masculine qualities in order to survive. Now, what triggered their need to survive could be different for each ancestor. However, when it boils down to how circumstances challenged their need to survive, normally ended up being the same, and that is becoming stuck in a state of fight or flight. And for example, also a subtle or overly expressive anger. You can also be looking at, for example, your mother's pregnancy with you. This also actually plays a vital role in you becoming more sensitive to developing this as a result of stress in your life as well, and interaction with close family members. Now, if your mother, for example, was exposed to a lifestyle where she had to constantly step into her masculinity and also tap into her anger resources, then this will have a big ripple effect on your feminine development and also your physical, energetic body. Now, as you mature, depending on your coping mechanisms and also how they formed over your lifespan, can set you apart from the person who is the peacekeeper or the aggressor. However, it still boils down to the positive associations that were made with being masculine, as this state as a woman kept you safe in the past. And it might also beg the question, it keeps you safe from what? Now, in most cases, being controlled or being dominated, feeling emotionally invaded or insulted and abused by masculine figures. Now, when I say masculine figures, keep in mind, I'm not necessarily referring to men who were abusive. This actually also could have been women who were very masculine and actually acted in aggressive and authoritative ways. Now, this masculine stance is then either fought against or it is accepted as a way of being and coping with circumstances that would make one feel, for example, intimidated or out of control. You also had to remain strong and be a shoulder to cry on for people. And you may also be confused as to what your actual role in your family should be. Looking back, you probably realize that you've been playing the role of the victim due to circumstances which required you to step into certain roles which left you feeling trapped. And you also held a high level of responsibility from a very early age. Now, as a result of the benefits that were felt through the state of mind, the masculine becomes a positive plus because of the characteristics and because of your need for constant safety. But it also becomes part of your personality foundation. Now, you see what's happening is that your true self is now being dominated by a characteristic that is not in alignment with you. However, your need for safety overpowers your common logic. So the end result is that you become someone that is not an expression of your true authentic self. And this ailment is also a reflection of stress associated with the masculine. It's associated with the mother, with the caretaker figure that suppressed your creativity and dominated your choices and decisions in life. And that they even, for example, could have smothered you with too much attention, which can also cause a whole new trauma cycle on its own. Right? So that also leaves a negative consequences as well. Now, either way, there is an internal struggle with your biological clock, deeply wanting, for example, to embrace motherhood. However, your experiences of being on the receiving end of a very troubled connection and also dynamic with a mother figure or a caretaker figure could have caused you to unconsciously sabotage and block this urge from surfacing. Right? So in most cases, the sabotage also comes forward as a conscious sabotage where anger and resentment is actually used to push these thoughts away, to also push people away that will cause these thoughts to come up. Now, I've also seen clients who had this condition and they, for example, didn't have a negative experience with their mother. However, they did with the father, which brings me back to masculine figures. So for example, feeling invaded, feeling powerless in the face of masculinity. For example, it could also be during intimacy, right? This is a big trigger as well. Especially if you have a heightened traumatic memory in your ancestry that's now been triggered. And this means that interactions that feel invasive could trigger predisposed sexual abuse trauma, and your body is now actually also reacting to it as if though it happened in your life. And also memories of these incidents can now come forward from the ancestors, actually adding even more emotional stress in your life experiences. Now, feeling out of control is also a very strong and dominant state of mind that you find yourself fighting against, even when your environment is showing you that everything is okay. Now, your unconscious mind is also in control here, right? And your need to continually assure yourself that you are safe and that you are in control. So you have also perhaps even lost so much energy by now that you've invested in always making sure that you are in control of everything, that you tend to isolate yourself from people as they might come and disrupt the little bit of silence and stillness that you've created in your life. Now you might also feel that everything had to be hard and also challenging, otherwise you will fail if it's too easy. You don't know how to be happy with always being in the middle of a challenge. Now, this is a familiar pattern, and you know how to survive in challenging patterns and circumstances. Now, what also happens here in this specific case is that you might find yourself feeling too responsible and feeling pressured by this responsibility. Now, what I've also seen in clients is that this specific pattern has actually been copied from a parent. And it's been copied from a parent because of that because of your need to relate to that parent. Now, if that's you, then it's looking at what unmet needs do you still have from that parent, because that was your way of coping and relating to them. But now that connection, that dynamic needs to switch to a healthier dynamic where you can connect to them without having to relate to them to such an extent where you copy and take on their emotional burdens and stress. Ultimately, this ailment is also a result of having to deal with and suppress intrusive dynamics with people that made you feel as that it's not safe to be a woman, that it's not safe to be feminine. Now, femininity has also become a weakness. It's a state of mind that is feared and rejected, which in turn means that you, for example, are also now rejecting yourself. You are rejecting your physical body, leaving a defragmented sense of self behind. Now, your need for love and self-love has also become very destructive, and the way that people treated you as a woman has now become your relationship with yourself. Now, I invite you as of today that every time when you feel unsafe, anxiety, or panic, that you consciously assess your present environment. Is there really truly something around you to validate how you feel? Right? Your body is asking you to start living a conscious life, and a life that is conscious to your needs, to your thoughts, and to what you want and desire from your destiny. Now, key points to explore with the Metaphysical Anatomy Technique or any modality of your choice. How did hiding your anger keep you safe? And also, what did it keep you safe from? Normally the answer to this question is your whole healing session. Explore points having to be as strong as a man for survival, right? Women being raised in very harsh conditions and also treated like a man. Now, there may also have been conflict between your parents about the desire for a boy during conception stages. Now, also, what made you take on the role, for example, of a sole supporter or comforter for others during your childhood? And how did that make you feel? Do you enjoy being a female? And if not, why? What happened that made you feel that way? For example, did you also witness men treating women in a degrading way? This also could have made you decide that it is safer to be more masculine than feminine. Another point to look at is which responsibility made you feel like you were losing control. Why did you have this responsibility in the first place? Was it, for example, a reasonable responsibility? If it wasn't, then explore this. How did it make you feel to be in that position? In most cases, not all, in most cases, there is a history of sexual abuse in the ancestry line. And this type of trauma might also have actually encouraged females to develop masculine qualities more than feminine qualities in order to keep them safe from harm. Now, another point is that resentment and anger towards men, also along with a deep need to protect themselves, can also be a mindset and a strategy that you unconsciously can adapt to when you feel unsafe. Now, this also, as we said earlier, could be related to ancestral trauma. Another point to look at is also built up anger and high blood pressure and resentment and vengeance in your mother, for example, could have had a very big impact on you in utero. Explore whether this had an impact on your hormonal development. Now, you may also feel challenged by your sexuality. If you do, why? What would happen if you allowed yourself to express it? Some people feel very angry when this question is being raised, right? And it stems from being suppressed. It stems from being taken advantage of or being humiliated or shamed. And it's time now for you to call your power back from these circumstances. You could also, for example, feel belittled and degraded for being a female. Now, of course, it begs the question, why? Who made you feel this way? Another question that I would like to ask you is, what must change in your life in order for you to embrace your femininity? Right? So also explore any resentment towards your mother. For example, you could feel that she failed her role towards you as a mother. It could also be feeling that perhaps there was a part of you that wanted more from her. Maybe she was emotionally absent due to stress in her own life. Now, in this case, you might also find it very challenging to connect to men. So, of course, again, the question is, why? What happened in the past that made you feel that way? Explore also the relationship with your father or influential male figure. It could be that your father was a very abusive figure, or your father was a very loving man, and you haven't been able to find a man to show you those same beliefs and values and same love. And as a result, resenting the relationships that you had in the past. Now, love could also, for example, you could have a negative association with love because your need for love was met in unhealthy ways, right? So love, for example, could equal hostility, it could equal jealousy, resentment, and also rejection. Now, I would also recommend Reclaiming Your Femininity meditation that is also on my YouTube channel under the meditations playlist. And also what you can do is you can go to the healing guided session which is at www.healingguidedsession.com to start your healing journey. Now, I'm sure that you might also be wondering by now, if some people, for example, had similar emotional traumas or stress and developmental histories as you, why didn't they develop PCOS? Now, for example, in this case, there were different aspects that I mentioned earlier, that there are points where a person has reached their emotional threshold and also their ability to emotionally and psychologically suppress it until it has reached a point where the emotional stress has now started to surface as pain, and this pain has now become a physical ailment. Or this condition could also be at the end result of a strong predisposition that has been activated in the biology due to extreme or long-term stress. So to answer your question as to why some people are challenged by PCOS, yet others who had the exact same emotional challenges, for example, that you did not develop this. The best explanation and observation that I have found so far is that this is basically the same for most ailments and also for psychological challenges that surfaces in a person's life. And that is that a person's threshold for enduring certain types of emotional and also environmental stress has reached its peak. For example, this made the person now overly sensitive, also known in my teachings and classes as a low threshold to certain types of stress and environmental factors. Now, a person with a high threshold for certain types of emotional stress or environmental stress will most likely have little to no biological reaction to stress that takes place in their life or during certain events, for example, that would be perceived as being traumatic. Now, it all depends on a person's predisposed threshold and how well a person can process stress and circumstances in their present life based on their biological resources, which is emotional, physical, and also spiritual. So thank you for joining me here today, and until next time, be the light that you are.